All right, and welcome to the first episode of our podcast, which we don't have a name for at the moment, but it's going to be myself and my co-host, Uzi Majid, just speaking about the weekly happenings in the Premier League and maybe football in general, but probably the Premier League because that's what we spend too much of our lives watching and analysing and talking about with each other. But just the introduction on my co-host, Uzi. He's a Brentford fan through and through, and he's also worked for, was it Football London or London Weekly?
Football.London, yeah.
Football.London followed Brentford around for a season, around London, around their Premier League games. Also done a bit of work for The Guardian as an editor as well, so comes in high esteem. But welcome, Uzi. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you very much.
And I think for our first episode, we're going to start off with talking a little bit about these first three games of the season so far. So, obviously, we're at an international break now, but we've had 3 Premier League games, and we're going to make some too early kind of comments. But, what can you do? You've had 3 games, so we're going to try our best. We're going to start off by talking each about 2 positives and 2 negatives that we've seen from the season so far. And this can be players, this can be games, it can be teams, it can be anything. And I think I'll start off myself. Maybe we'll have some overlap. We've not discussed this yet, so let's see. But I'm going to start off with, I have 2 teams, and I'll start off with positives, and I'll start off with one of my teams being Everton, because I watched Everton's second game against Brighton when they opened their new stadium. And by the way, what a stadium. I mean, I still remember that shot of them showing the drone image kind of going over, is it Hill Dickinson Stadium? But
Hill Dickinson, yeah.
Hill Dickinson. And it was just, I remember sunny. I think it was a midday kickoff, and it just looked amazing. And I think they've got a great stadium, and honestly, really good that they stayed up last season and the season before when they were, not at the right end of the table for them, because to be in the Premier League with this stadium, that's where they needed to be. And I watched that team. I watched their highlights against Leeds, and obviously they lost their first game, but they're currently 5th in the league on 6 points. 1 against Brighton in that game, 1 against Wolves last week, 3-2. And what I like about Everton is their attacking options. So this season, they're playing with Ndiaye, Grealish, Keenan Dewsbury-Hall, and then either Beto or Barry up front. So they have a new signing, Thierry Barry from Villarreal, and it's a real talent.
Yeah.
Thierry Barry, I think 22 years old, young striker, scored a few goals in La Liga last season, maybe 11 off the top of my head, but I really like his raw attributes. I mean, he's still a really raw striker, but I think this is a kind of signing that will thrive in this Everton team, where he's given a bit of freedom up front and, not a huge amount of pressure on him, especially when, you look at some of their summer business, and Dibling's not played yet, I don't think, or maybe played a little bit in the last game. But I really like Tyler Dibling's raw kind of ability. When I watched him for Southampton last year, I think he's got really good pace, powerful. He did fade a little bit towards the end of the season, but just like Southampton faded. So I think he can pick it up again. And I think that's a really exciting attacking option. Obviously, Grealish. I mean, what I really like to see with teams, and what I find are players who do really well in a season, are those who have something to prove. So those players who come with something to prove. And you could say out of all the players in the Premier League, Jack Grealish may have the most to prove this season. And Everton invested a lot of money in him. So I'm reading that they're paying 75% of his wage, which is 300k. So over the course of the year, that comes out to around 12 million pounds. So it's not necessarily a cheap loan for them, but I mean, I think he's already got 4 assists in his first 2 games, and he's looking again, not the finished article, but he's looking closer to that Jack Grealish that we saw at Everton, and even in that kind of second season at City, where he's looking like he has something to prove. And I think he really works well in this Everton team. And Everton last season, we've never had questions on their defense. I think they were 4th. They conceded the 4th fewest goals in the league last season, only 42 goals. Oh, sorry, they were tied 4th in goals conceded, or the least goals conceded, I should say, 44 goals. Only City, Chelsea, Liverpool, and Arsenal were lower than them. But their issue was they couldn't score goals last year, so they only scored 42 goals last season, and that was the 4th lowest. Their defense has been consistently good. Their forward line has not been good, and I think they've got some options there going into this season. And if they can keep a solid defense and just add to their attacking play a little bit more, I think it could be a really fun season for Everton. I think they could, I'm not saying they're going to be European contenders, but Everton have had a really dismal few years. I think they can challenge, Conference League, potentially. I think already if they finish top half of the table, that's a lot of progress for them, and especially seeing that they have a young team. So that's what I've gone with my first positive. Ozzy, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually going to go with. I know they lost their first game, but I'm actually going to go with. I'm going to go with Bournemouth actually, because we saw them against Liverpool. They may have lost 4-2, but my God, I mean, if there was ever a team that put in such a good performance and still ended up conceding 4 goals, it was them. And I mean, they've done remarkable. I mean, 2 wins on their first 3, and people forget they lost 75% of their defense from last season. Huijsen went to Madrid, Zabani went to PSG, and I think the old Kirkes went to Liverpool as well. So I mean,
and Kepa
and they did,
as well. Their keeper Kepa
yeah,
as well.
I mean, they did have him on a loan, but point granted. So yeah, to lose like 4 players of pretty high quality and losing 3 of them to teams who you would say contenders to win the Champions League. One of them being the Champions League, the current Champions League holders, and to replace them all in such a remarkably short period of time, is remarkable. We've seen players, even some of the big clubs, we've seen them lose maybe 1 player and, struggle to replace them, at all. To lose 75% of your defense and to still be competitive. And I think, of course, they ended up keeping Antoine Semenyo, who's been, absolutely brilliant for them. And of course, Justin Kluivert as well. Evan Nilsson looks like that player, he came from Porto last season. He, still looked very dangerous, but at the same time, a little bit raw, but he looks like he's really coming, into his shell. They've been really good. I mean, you would never have thought a side who, again, lost pretty much their entire defense would be, I think, 6th, 5th or 6th at the moment. So, to be where they are and, come off the back of a really good win at Tottenham just before the international break, they absolutely completely played them off the park. I think Tottenham only had 1 shot on target throughout the whole 90. So, Bournemouth should have, won by a lot more. So they've been really good so far this season. I don't know what cap you could put on their, aspirations for the season, but if they were to keep everyone together, they were in the running for European football last season. They just had a bit of a wobble towards the end, which obviously ended up costing them. But maybe that experience could make them stronger, and they could maybe be fighting for a possible Conference League or Europa League. Of course, that depends on how English clubs do in Europe this season. Of course, there might be one or two places more up for grabs. So they'll definitely look at that as some sort of motivation.
It's a great point. And Bournemouth, like I said, like you said, to lose your backline like that, especially a backline that's been so solid, that is just, it can be detrimental, but they've done absolutely brilliantly. And actually, I was reading the Athletic ranked all 155 signings in the Premier League this year, and just after the window closed, I was reading it the other day, and it's just come to mind now as you're speaking. But they ranked one of Bournemouth's signings as number 4 out of all the signings that were made in terms of value for money. And this is their left back, Adrian Truffert, who they signed from Rennes or Stade Rennais. What was that, Rennes? I'm not actually sure which one of the two, but he was their captain last season and one of Ligue 1's best fullbacks, and they got him for 14 million as a 23-year-old, and he started at left back. He's Kirkes' replacement, so they've done some brilliant business there. But I think that's a great shout. I'll go on to my next team, and like I said, as a positive, actually, you know what, why don't we go 1 positive, 1 negative? Let's switch it up, because I want to end on a positive. So I'll go for my first disappointment, and this may surprise you. As an Arsenal fan, it surprised me. It was tough to say, but I'm going to say Victor Gyökeres as an Arsenal fan. And the easy thing to say is, listen, it's been 2 games, or 3 games, I should say, and he scored 2 goals. Give him some time. And that's all true. We're only 3 games in, but I need to I can't just say the easy thing. I have to say what I see, and I'm supporting him out. There's nothing more that I want than him to do well and score goals over the next few weeks. But from what I see, I am a little bit worried about him. And it's not that he's not scored X number of goals, or it's not that he's, he didn't win the game against Liverpool, so on. It's more I look at his technical ability, and I'm a little bit worried. He looks very heavy as a player, and I think it's understandable given that this is a player that only a few years ago was playing championship football, and he's not really played at the top level yet. He's played obviously at Sporting Lisbon the last 2 seasons, but what you have with young players who play at a high level, maybe play the academy football or play Premier League at a young age, they develop their technical ability quick. And Gyökeres is one of those players who, unfortunately, he doesn't really have a lot of technical ability from what I've seen. And that's fine because that's not his strength. But I think it's going to be about Gyökeres for us as fans and the general media becoming used to the fact that this is not the kind of striker that's going to change a game for you, the way that Isak can change a game, the way that we would hope that a new number 9 or a 60 plus million pound signing would change the game at centre forward. I don't think he's going to be that. I think he's going to be a good striker, maybe in terms of value wise, a 40 million pound striker or so, but I had this kind of romantic image that we're going to sign a number 9 and he was going to solve a lot of our problems in attack. And he's not, if I'm making a prediction now, he's not going to be that. Doesn't mean he's going to be a bad signing, but I think there's going to be some struggles there. And I think he's not, unlike Sesko, who has years to grow and time to grow, and some other young strikers, he's not really going to grow that. So we just have to be comfortable with what he is. But it was just a little bit disappointing, Gyökeres, for myself as an Arsenal fan. But let's see how it goes. Obviously, very early days. But yeah, let's go on to your disappointment. What have you got?
I was actually torn. So I've picked a team, but I'm torn between two. And I've decided, just purely based on expectation, I'm going to go with Man City. I think they've been very poor this season. I know they won their first game at Wolves, and Wolves even had good chances to score before City obviously took control, and even they didn't score their first goals until I think just over half an hour. Pretty poor, Hamza. Obviously, I mean, lost to Tottenham at home just before the international break. We know of Tottenham's good record against Man City, but it was the way, pretty much like the way they lost that game. Barely had any control. And just obviously the last game, obviously against Brighton, having been 1-0 up, and having looked comfortable for long periods of the game, to lose 2-1, take nothing away from Brighton. They're a good team on their day. Didn't lose against any of the top 6 at home last season. But Man City. I mean, Man City are a better team than Brighton. We're not getting away from that, and to let that lead obviously slip and be below their City rivals, who are in an absolute free fall at the moment. No, didn't think we'd be talking before Sunday's derby, thinking that United would be the ones going into that above City and below Leeds as well. So, I know it is only 3 games, and the table's not going to look like that at the end of the season, but they've been pretty disappointing from what I've seen so far. And transfer business wise, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I mean, because I know they got Rayan Cherki, but he's injured now, and I think he's not going to be back for at least 2 months. Yeah, they got Donnarumma in. It's a very intriguing signing. It's be interesting to see how he does. But City, for me, they don't look like the side. I know people maybe thought last year was a blip. But the way they're going, could be a repeat this season. But we know what they're about. We've seen them come from the dead before. But having seen what I've seen so far, I would be shocked if they finished above Arsenal and Liverpool at the end of the season.
No, you know what? When you said Man City, I smiled a little bit, and the reason being is I don't have them as my disappointment, but I have Pep as my disappointment. Like we said, like you just mentioned about Man City, we know what they're about. We know what they're capable of. No disrespect to a team that's, won 4 Premier League titles in a row, has been the team of the 2020s so far. No team can have sustained success for this many years. I mean, it's already, to win 4 Premier Leagues in a row is unbelievable already. So credit to them. But, I think we accepted last season from Man City and from Pep, just given their success. But we were hoping for a little bit different, or well, I say we, Man City fans, would be hoping for something a little bit different going into this season. And the reason I wrote Pep down and not Man City necessarily is because Man City have so many talented players. And it's a really exciting team because you have a lot of new players, young players who are trying to prove themselves. Lewis, Bob, Cherki, Gonzalez, Marmoush, even Haaland this season has got a point to prove. But who am I to question Pep Guardiola? Who am I to question Pep Guardiola? But what I thought impacted Man City a little bit last season was the constant rotation. And, that's been a feature of Pep as a manager for as long as you can remember, right? Especially at Man City. He's constantly rotated. But I think he was successful at doing that when he had that squad of players who was kind of who were used to playing with each other, who were established in that team, you know, that kind of 2020 to 2023 or 2024 team they were established and they knew how to play with one another. I think that helped with this kind of rotation and keeping players on their toes, even pre 2020. But I think with this new team, I mean, there's been a revamp over the last kind of two seasons, the last 4 windows, and I don't think this rotation's helping. You know, if I look at their first 2 games, I know they won on the opening day, but they lost against Spurs in their second game. And in both those games, they're the same back line. So I was like, wow, okay, is Pep I was actually surprised, honestly, for 2 games in a row. Then you go on to their third game. Who did they play last week again?
Brighton.
Their Brighton game, of course, lost 2-1. And they've changed their back line. You know, all of a sudden it's gone from Aït-Nouri, Stones, Diaz, Rico Lewis to Aït-Nouri, Kusanov at centre-back, Mateus Nunes and Stones. And just thought, is there really a need? Is there really a need to change this? Yeah. Is there really a need to make that change? I know you lost, but that's why it's a little bit disappointing for me, because I just thought Pep would, and the midfield was changing as well between those 3 games, you know. So that's what was a little bit disappointing. I thought Pep would sort of settle on a team and make rotations here and there, but it doesn't seem like he's doing that. And Man City, they just need to find some stability and something to push forward. Even if it's not perfect, find those talented players. I think he looks like he likes Bob on the right wing. Obviously, he likes Haaland. Obviously, he tends to like Marmoush, and Reinders seems like a fixed point in that midfield, obviously with Rodri now coming back. So he's got some players there, and Stones has played all 3 games as well. But I want to see a little bit more solidarity, because as soon as you start chopping and changing players, it's you know, can lead to a lot of uncertainty and a decline in results and performances. So that was my second disappointment. Let's go on to our last positives. I think let's leave out the last disappointment. Let's end on some positives, and I'll let you go first for your last or your second positive.
Again, it's another team. Almost Sunderland. Obviously 2 wins out of 3. Sadly, one of them being against my team, Brentford. But yeah, they've done remarkably well so far. You know, a lot of it doesn't exactly. I don't want to use the word like upheaval, but in terms of, you know, transfer activity, there's certainly a lot as, you know, obviously a lot has happened, you know, since they've come back up. Since being away for 8 years. But, you know, they've, you know, from having seen their signings, you know, they bought really well. You play, you know, well in Granit Xhaka. They signed from Bayer Leverkusen. They've looked well so far. And I think, in terms of like from a fixture point of view, I think it couldn't have been better. It couldn't have been better for them. I mean, to have, you know, your first 2 home games being against, you know, West Ham and Brentford. You think to yourself, you know, a huge opportunity to try and get 6 points in before the so-called big boys come over. So I think to win those games, you know, that will be huge in them staying up, because, you know, the season's not going to be defined on, you know, losing to teams like Liverpool and Arsenal and, you know, Man City. So I think to win, you know, I think that's the, you know, the main message but just task for anyone outside the so-called top 6 is that, you know, these are games you got to win if you want to, you know, whether it's survive or, you know, try and get European football, you know. And I think obviously the fans will be very key in that as well. You know, really good from what we've seen, really good atmospheres. They'll be very keen helping them survive. And I think, you know, with the team camaraderie and how everything's going for them at the moment, and a great job Regis Labrie, I think is Labrie has done so far. You know, I think, you know, he certainly has them. He has them in a good place, and I think he'll certainly be. He and obviously his players will. You know, I think they'll look to maximize the home advantage against the sides who, you know, newly promoted sides, and, you know, even teams who, you know, hovering outside the lower mid-table or just outside the relegation zone. So that's where they'll really look to try and, you know, get as many home points as they can.
I mean, yeah, it's great. I mean, if you told Sunderland fans 2 wins in 3 games to start your season, they'd bite your hand off at the beginning of the season. So you've gone with 2 sort of lower, you know, lesser known, or, you know, not necessarily the Champions League teams. I have gone with, for my second positive, I've gone with Chelsea. And listen, I think one thing that shocked me was I saw that Chelsea actually this transfer window have taken in more money than they've spent. So they've actually made a profit this transfer window. Now I know it's a little bit, what does that really mean? Because a lot of these players that they're selling, they bought for a little bit more, but they've also made some really good sales. I look at Nkunku for £36 million and João Felix for £30 million. I know this is still a loss on them, but at the end of the day, these are players who've pretty much done nothing for 2 seasons, and you got 66 million for them. And even Chukwuemeka Kani, as I'll call him, they sold for £24 million to Dortmund. Again, another player who's not really done anything for a season and a half. So I thought they made some good sales, and this squad looks a little bit deeper. They've got Esugo and Santos in the midfield. They've got, these young wide players that have now come in Esteval, Tins and Garnacho. Again, players who have something to prove. And you got João Pedro and Delap coming in. So many new players, but they've done decent. They've kept that defense more or less the same as last season, and they seem to have stuck on this Cucurella, Gusto. They got Chalobah in there as well, and then they've got this new young centre back in as well. And that's worked really well for them. I mean, Chelsea for the last couple seasons have been a good defensive team. Last year, they were really good defensive teams. I like what they've done, and I watched them, and I just, contrast this to Man City, who also have a lot of new players and are struggling to find their feet, whereas Chelsea players, Maresca's done well to get them to kind of make them a cohesive unit. Obviously, a lot of credit as well to Enzo and Caicedo in the midfield for kind of leading that team. But they've done really well, and even in their last game against Fulham, which is a tricky game for them, a West London derby, without Palmer to win 2-0, I thought it was a really solid result. Obviously, a lot of controversies in that game. No, credit to Chelsea. I think everyone has an opinion on them, what they've done in the transfer window, but on the pitch, they're pulling out some good results, and ultimately that's all that matters. So yeah, let's leave it there. I think some great points made, and let's move on to your segment, which is going to be me questioning you about the good old Brentford, because it's been a very interesting summer for you. A lot of high impact losses, of course. The start of your manager, you lost Thomas Frank to Tottenham. You lost, of course, Wissa, Mbeumo, Norgard, your captain, Ben Mee, vital part of that defense. You made a lot of money from these signings. You received £134 million in. You spent a little bit of money as well, so £84 million spent, but still you made a profit this summer, and I think as a fan you probably want to spend that money. But it's been you can describe the start, but you've got 1 win from 3 games against Villa. Obviously a heartbreaking loss to Sunderland in that previous game, but this, I'm sure, been some positives that you can take from it. And yeah, interesting to know as a Brentford fan how you feel about the summer and how you feel about these first 3 games that you've had.
Well, summer's always going to be perhaps one of the biggest the club's history, having lost, of course. I think Frank was, across all 4 leagues, I think was like the 3rd or 4th long-serving manager in English football. I think to lose him was always going to be a bit of a blow. And of course, having lost players like Norgard to Arsenal, who was like such a linchpin in midfield. But, and of course, more crucially, to lose 39 league goals in Mbeumo and Wissa, albeit for 126 million quid. It's been a pretty hectic summer. I think that would be an understatement. I think with regards to getting replacements in, so Dango Itara came in from Bournemouth. He is the Mbeumo replacement, and I've actually liked the look of him so far. I think he's looked really, really, really promising. Still very young, only 23. It's not, for an attacker. My reservation was just a little bit on his price tag. 42 million. I think it is the whole deal. So
36 million base fee, and then I guess 6 million in add-ons.
Yeah, I mean, still big money for an attacker. Having seen him so far, I quite like the look of him. Comes across as as a really good character. And really unlucky to he actually scored in that game at Sunderland, but sadly it was ruled out by VAR. So, he's somebody who's it's very to replace Brian Mbeumo is a very huge task in itself, but he's looked very promising so far, and I really like him. So I really hope he can pick up where he's always left off so far, and with the games coming up, huge month ahead, 2 West London derbies back to back, and then Man United at home. And then, of course, Villa in the cup as well. So, it's not going to be an easy one. But I think the good thing about this is that they don't have to leave West London at all until the next international break. So there's absolutely no excuse for fatigue. But just going back to the games, I mean, they've been a little bit, Sunderland was disappointing, having had a goal disallowed and then having a penalty miss as well. When your luck's out, it's out. So, that was disappointing. Villa had, wasn't a pretty game, and having been there, but, this stage, you don't really care about performances, you just care about winning. So, but it was good to show that little bit of fights and defensive solidity that we've perhaps maybe not shown in recent time. Forest, I was just that was a awful, just an awful performance all around. You can talk about the lineup that started that day, but I don't think. Well, I say Nuno. Well, Nuno's obviously gone now, but I don't think he'll ever manage an easier game than that for however long he manages. And I think Forest was Forest was a very disappointing performance, but Villa was good. It wasn't great, but it was good. Sunderland, we showed we can give anyone a fight, or we can be a bit dangerous on the attack, but ultimately when you get done on 2 set pieces, you get done, then obviously it's not great. You pay a very heavy price, but that's how it goes, But I'm looking forward, but
this is what I want to ask you is, talking about going forward, is has anything you've seen over the last 3 weeks changed your expectation for Brentford this season? And what is your expectation for Brentford this season?
I think having lost Frank and all those players, I think you would have just taken survival this year, and try and keep everyone together and not lose anyone to injury. Yeah, I think it's always going to be tough to have another push for Europe is always going to be a bit difficult, especially when you've lost your manager. That's how it goes. I think as long as you finish above 17th, it's not too bad. I think just to keeping everyone together, getting a team, getting a lineup, a solid lineup together, and finishing above 3 worst teams. I think that's probably this season's target.
Right. Let's end this off by getting into some predictions for this weekend, because we finally have Premier League football back and we have some interesting games this weekend. We've got a derby, and a couple of derbies, a London derby. We got a Manchester derby. We got another London derby as well that your Brentford are participating in. So we got some interesting games. I'll start off. So I'll say the fixture. I'll say my prediction. Quick fire. You tell me yours. So Arsenal versus Nottingham Forest. I'm going for a 2-1 Arsenal win.
I'll go 3-1 Arsenal.
Bournemouth against Brighton. I'm going 1-0 Bournemouth.
I'm going to go with a draw. I'll go 1-1.
Palace against Sunderland. I'm going 2-1 Palace. Palace at home I like. I'm going 2-1 Palace.
I think it'll be tight. I think Palace will win. I'll go 1-0.
Everton against Aston Villa. I've spent all episode bigging up Everton, but I'm going to go for 1-1 draw. I'm going to go for Villa having a bit of a bounce back.
Yeah. I think Villa might. I think they might break their duck. I think they'll win this. I think they'll win 2-1, which is a big ask given they haven't even scored a league goal yet. But yeah, I think they'll win 2-1.
They got to get a win soon. This could be the one. Fulham against Leeds. They've gone with the smart thing to do would be go Fulham, but I'm going with a 2-1 Leeds win.
Okay. I'm actually going to go I'll go with a border, actually. I'm going to go 0-0.
Newcastle against Wolves. So Newcastle freed from the Isaac shackles. With that, I'm going to go 2-0 Newcastle. I've liked what I've seen for the most part this season, and Wolves, they've got the striker and Strand Larson to do something dangerous, but I'm still going to go Newcastle at home.
Yeah, I'll go Newcastle at home 3-0.
West Ham against Tottenham. I mean, what West Ham is going to turn up, what Tottenham's going to turn up, I have no idea. I'm going to go 2-1 to Tottenham, but I'm not confident in it.
I'm actually going to go. I was actually thinking that as well, and I'm still going to go with it. I'll go 2-1 Spurs.
Brentford against Chelsea. What have I gone? What have you gone with?
You know what? We haven't beaten Chelsea at home yet, and I really hope that this is the night we do it. So, even though it hasn't gone all to plan, I'm still not going to predict us to lose. So I want to say we are going to nick it 2-1.
I've gone 1-0 Chelsea. Burnley against Liverpool. I've gone. If this was almost an evening game, I would lean more towards a draw or maybe a Burnley win. So, but I'm looking at this fixture. I'm going 3-1 Liverpool, but I don't think Liverpool are going to play super well. I'll put it that way.
I was actually thinking more towards that as well. I'll go with that 3-1 Liverpool. I think it'll be a bit of a slog, but I think they'll get through it.
I agree. Man City, Man United to end our weekend, Sunday, 4:30. Who knows? But I'm going with a 2-2. I think there'll be goals in this game. I'm going with a 2-2.
You got me here. I'm gonna go like you. I'm gonna go with a draw, but I'm gonna say 1-1.
Who's scoring?
Who's scoring? Good question. I think Haaland for City and Bruno to get his obligatory penalty.
In front of the away end, I think, as well. Yeah. Oh, great. All right. Well, that wraps up our first episode. I think that went great, but we'll have to put it out to the jury. But Uzi, thank you very much for joining. And yeah, hopefully we can chat very soon.
Thank you, Hamza, for having me.